You're watching Force 13's live streaming service.
And now, around the wide world of tropics. Here is the Tropic Weather Bulletin for July 21st, live. Well, here we are, first live TWB in a while, but we have 4 systems presently active, 2 of them still tropical. Cempaka, now inland China, and of course the biggest threat of them all, Typhoon Infa, a Category 2, barreling itself towards the Okinawa and Ryukyu Islands, as well as Taiwan. Felicia and Guillermo now dead in the eastern Pacific. It's day 51 of Atlantic hurricane season with nothing active at this time. Nothing expected in the next 5 days there, so really nothing to talk about in this basin in particular. 5 tropical storms have formed so far this year, with 1 becoming a hurricane. It's day 67 of Eastern Pacific hurricane season. Felicia and Guillermo are pretty much gone at this point. However, there is a 10% AOI that will be forming towards the later part of the forecast period, around day 5 and then later on to day 6 or 7. Could cross into the Central Pacific. In the Western Pacific, we have Typhoon Infa as well as Tropical Storm Cempaka. We did have a medium chance AOI to the east of Infa, however the chances have gone down significantly as it is looking like it will be turning into a strong extratropical system rather than a tropical system. In the North Indian Ocean, we're looking at nothing going on here, average monsoonal activity, and of course it is July and we are still not looking at anything for quite a while here. Here is the North Atlantic satellite imagery, not really much going on. Of course, there is some activity that is going off towards Bermuda, but of course that is all frontal, not really anything that's going to be developing. An extratropical system that can be located a few hundred miles off the United Kingdom. Otherwise, there is not really much going on here. In the Eastern Pacific, you can see the remains of what used to be Felicia and Guillermo towards the center of your screen. Neither have produced convection in quite a while, and as a result, both of them are at this point remnant lows. Nothing really off the other AOI yet. Typhoon Infa has continued to organize significantly over the last few hours. We now have it at 105 miles an hour with a pressure of 954 millibars. And then of course Cempaka, the tiny system, is located over China, will be performing a loop before exiting across the Hainan Peninsula back into the South China Sea soon enough. And then of course with the North Indian Ocean, the average monsoonal activity continuing across the Bay of Bengal with not really much going on in the Arabian Sea. The picture of 2 opposites continuing for these 2 basins, and it is pretty much what we typically expect for this time anyways. Here's the latest satellite imagery on Infa. It has definitely gotten a lot better organized in terms of its structure over the last 12 to 24 hours. A much better eye than what we saw with the rough, ragged eye yesterday, and it is likely that we could be seeing a major out of this before a possible landfall on one of the Japanese islands soon enough. Here is the sea surface temperatures at the moment, 28 to 29 degrees in terms of the Eastern Pacific waters. Those 30 degrees Celsius waters only confined to the coast of Mexico. In the Atlantic, we're starting to see some of those 30 degrees Celsius waters come up for the immediate Gulf Coast, while the main development region as well as the Caribbean continue to see temperatures around 27 to 28 degrees, although the waters are a little bit cooler south of Hispaniola and Puerto Rico. In the North Indian Ocean, we're still watching those sea surface temperatures continue to dwindle across the western Arabian Sea. Bay of Bengal continuing to stay around 27 to 28 degrees Celsius. And then of course with the South China Sea and Philippine Sea, we're looking at those waters around 30 degrees Celsius, with Infa currently around those 29 to 30 degree isotherms, very conducive for the system. And then of course in the southern hemisphere, it continues to be cold there, so obviously no development in terms of what you would expect there. So everything remains quiet down there, and the main threats remain Infa and Cempaka, of course. Cempaka, I should say. Here are the sea surface temperature anomalies. We're still looking at those neutral to La Nina conditions. We're looking at the subtropics remaining pretty warm. And of course that cold spell that's continuing across the California, Baja, all the way south of Hawaii. And that's pretty much where we go. Well, here's the latest satellite imagery on, of course, Infa there. I will be introducing my team extremely shortly. And with us tonight, we have Elliot, Devin, Jonesy, Noah, as well as Mike and Christian. How are you guys doing tonight?
We are doing good, I guess.
Doing very well.
Yeah, I'd say that we're having a jolly good time. Right?
Oh, for sure, Devin.
Quite the evolving situation we are seeing here with Infa. What are we looking at in terms of how much this has improved today?
I'd say it's improved quite a lot, honestly. You see this robust convection is starting to wrap around the center, forming a pretty solid eye wall. The eye has also started to get a little more well-defined over recent frames. I think this is very well on its way to being a major typhoon, and it's pretty large as well, so it's going to be pretty important to look out for storm surge impacts and rainfall impacts as we head into the coming days.
Yeah.
And based on the latest 0Z fix, I believe that remains 105 miles an hour and 954.
Oh,
What?
We're losing you, Devin.
Devin, your signal is bad.
Basically, yes. Right now we have Infa at 90 knots, 105 miles per hour, and a minimum central pressure of 954 millibars.
And what are our latest estimates on Cempaka? Of course, that is currently inland China as well.
Latest on Cempaka, currently inland, 55 knots, if someone wants to convert that into miles per
60.
hour.
That would be 65.
Okay, and 989 millibars.
That's right. So Cempaka is definitely weakening quite a bit. I believe we had it as a category 2 at peak.
Yeah, we did. I did the video update on that, I believe.
Right. So definitely weakening quite a bit. Heavy rainfall is definitely still a threat since it is pretty slow moving at this point. And its future is looking fairly uncertain, but it should stay pretty weak when it goes back over the South China Sea, I'd think.
Mike has infrared imagery currently up, and what are you seeing off of this, Mike?
This infrared imagery, before it was dealing with dry air entrainment, which actually inhibited intensification for a brief moment, but now it seems to have mixed out most of the dry air and is currently wrapping convective bursts around the eye, which is causing it to clear. I would say that it will continue improving and we will likely see a major typhoon soon.
Yeah, Mike, you see also this green tongue towards the eye, so that might be a current dry air intrusion, but a new convection wrapping around it on the left side should mix that out rather soon. When I looked at the system earlier it looked pretty messy with big breaks. It still has this dry air intrusion, but when you look at the eye temperature on the Dvorak, there's some specs of WMG that's 9 degrees or more in the eye. So the eye temperature is improving, the overall structure of the storm is becoming more symmetric, not this incredibly messy convective mode, but actually a consolidated circular central dense overcast with a warming eye. And you also see a lot of mesovorices in the eye and the eye wall. When I looked at the radar earlier, it was really not a circular consolidated eye wall, but it was apparent that there were many strong mesovorices. There are still mesovorices in the eye, but in general the eye wall has become much more consolidated and circular and more intense. So we're definitely looking at a intensifying tropical cyclone, which is on the way to become a major typhoon.
And yeah, it can definitely be seen on how much it's improved on satellite. Yesterday, when I was looking at it, the eye was completely rough and ragged. It definitely did not look well in terms of its structure, and it has definitely improved since then. And it, of course, can be proven with the improved structure as well as better conditions that it's been in without the constant battles of dry air that it's been dealing with.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this system is an extreme threat to the islands that it will be affecting. And of course, here we have Devin with us as well.
Yep.
Devin,
We did.
well, we did.
Uh,
But we do have the cyclone destruction potential scale. And unfortunately, it is now up to a CDPS stage 7. Christian,
Yes.
of course, you're doing the video update that will be coming out at the top of the hour.
Yes. I can. Yeah, I can go into detail in regards to the breakdown of
Yep.
this stage 7 on CDPS if you would like me to.
Yep, that's perfectly cool.
Okay, so just bear with me here. What I have noted on my screen right now is a wind speed of major, storm size of major to extreme, rainfall potential also major to extreme, and the overall threat to land is also major to extreme. This is for, if I get this pronunciation right, Takatomi Island for Friday evening, local time.
Yep, so unfortunately we're looking at a significant CDPS. Stage 7 of course fits in that life-threatening situation. And unfortunately with that rainfall we could be looking at up to 24 to 30 inches of rain that could fall out of Infa here. Definitely a significant amount. That would be over 500 millimeters of rain there. Not something that you really want to be messing with at all. So if you are in the Okinawa and Ryukyu Islands as well as Taiwan, because Taiwan you will be in line for this clearly, thanks to the large system. So it may not make landfall, but definitely going to be feeling the force of the system, especially the northern half of the island. Mike has switched over to the water vapor imagery, and Mike, what are you seeing off of this specific type?
Well, you can see that the eye is continuing to clear out as a result of the convective burst wrapping around. But another thing that you can easily notice is that there seems to be a white arc that denotes drier air moving into circulation.
And what kind
which I think will have some effects on the system, but it should mix it out soon.
Yeah, and there is also always a possibility that that could be due to subsidence from the very deep convection that's right next to it.
It just looks like your classic intensification where you have convective bursts around, dry air intrusion, then it gets mixed out and again until you establish a consolidated cyclotrends overcast with not these localized convective bursts wrapping around, but a more what we call isentropic lift structure, where you have a more evenly distributed central dense overcast, and that's likely to happen within the next 12 to 24 hours, where we don't have this pattern of big convective bursts and then dry air intrusion, and then comes in convective bursts and then another dry air intrusion.
Yeah. Can we get the latest cones from the Joint Typhoon Warning Center on Infa and Cempaka, so that way we can get an outline of the threats associated?
I believe I've got one already up of Infa. Excuse me. I can get one up of Cempaka very soon as well.
Alright, well, while we wait for that, Noah has the radar scope imagery of Infa there, and what are you seeing off the radar imagery?
So yeah, first there seems to be something blocking the radar in here, so we don't see just to the that's west of the eye wall, but at least we see the eye wall and the eye, and you can clearly see this dry air intrusion through here. I think that's around here where we have just light gray on the Dvorak right now. so pretty significant dry air intrusion. But generally, you can see here are the big convective bursts. Those are wrapping around and contracting and consolidating the eye. This whole dry air spot will likely get mixed out. And you don't see, I can loop this now. You don't see how it looked 2 hours ago, but I can tell you that this is much better what it looked like 2 hours ago. So yeah, you can see very good on this loop how the dry air is coming into it. Here we have this break of the dry air, so pretty significant dry air intrusion, which is holding the intensity a bit, but it will likely will not be enough to entirely shut down the intensification. As we can see, more intense convection wrapping around, and that will uh, not take long until this dry air intrusion is mixed out. But yeah, generally it is improving.
Right. Well, if you wanted to show the comments up on stream, they should be up and running right about now.
Alright, let me get to that. So here's the latest comment from the Joint Typhoon Warning Center. They are now currently running with a peak of Category 3, with winds of 120 miles an hour now expected. That is a little bit up from their previous cone. And then, of course, they do have a landfall within our days 4 and 5. And this would be in, of course, China. It looks to be minimal typhoon or strong storm, tropical storm by the time it gets there. But of course, it will be on a weakening trend before it makes landfall, which obviously is good. But regardless, we're still looking at a very large system, which, combined with its slow movement, is not exactly the best of good news for China, Taiwan, or any of the Japanese islands that are going to be impacted by this storm. But at the moment, we are looking at the peak to be tomorrow, where it reaches that Category 3 status. So as others have previously said, of course, we are dealing with dry air intrusion right now, but unfortunately we'll be mixing it out, and that will be helping keep this system afloat and definitely not over in terms of its intensification trend. And Cempaka cone. This is the latest cone on Cempaka. Kind of looks a little odd, but we are looking at a very uncertain future in terms of what goes on with Cempaka. As of right now, it is expected that it does emerge west of the Hainan Peninsula. Now, what's going to happen then is going to be a little bit interesting because, of course, you now have the peninsula as well. Could intensify back to a tropical storm, and then after that, it weakens again, and then there is a little bit uncertainty of what happens because at that point, we could be dealing with a potential interaction with Infa. So, at the 5-day marks, both Cempaka and Infa are in the cone at the same location at some point. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see whether there is any interaction between the small Cempaka and the very large Infa.
Right, and based on what we've seen from cyclones interacting with each other, it's pretty safe to assume that if they do interact, it'll be Infa that's absorbing Cempaka.
Indeed. We now have the Dvorak bands for Infa, and what are you seeing based off of this specific type? Anything else that we've been regarding, or is there any new stuff that we are seeing out of this?
Well, on the Dvorak band, which I'm currently showing, you can see that the eye is currently clearing to WMG, which is warm medium gray. And that would denote of an eye temp above or at 9 degrees Celsius. And then you have that eye currently embedded in about medium gray, since there are some cracks in the LG structure, light gray structure. And that would give it a eye number of 4.5, which would give an intensity of T4.5 or 80 knots. And then it's currently surrounded in LG, which if it was surrounded in black, like you see here, it would give it an extra boost to its current P4.5 appearance. So currently, this Dvorak imagery should suggest an 80 knots intensity, while that is not the case due to other satellite observations and intensification rate.
Yeah. Seems I would suggest more or less T5 if, I mean, that's what we're looking at here.
Yeah, and also what's visible on this imagery is that the eye, that's dark gray in the eyes, so that's around -40, I think. So it still needs some work to fully clear out that eye. This blob of WMG is gonna rotate around, and slowly the subsidence will win out the fight with the cirrus pattern that is still in the eye, and clear that out fully. So you're gonna have a pattern where the eye temperature fluctuates up and down pretty drastically because of the cirrus clouds are gonna obscure the eye, then it's gonna clear out at some point at some location, and then it's gonna obscure it again until it's fully cleared out.
You have definitely something to watch with that. Elliot now has the imagery of Cempaka, which I'll be bringing up soon enough. This looks to be the visible imagery, but just based off of the appearance. Okay, now we've just switched over. But what are we seeing off from Cempaka, Elliot?
Cempaka is fading away pretty rapidly over land. As you can see, the majority of the deep convection is now located back west of the Hainan Peninsula, and not at the storm center, which is just inland. And this basically suggests that the maximum winds are also going to be to the south of the center at this point, off at sea rather. And honestly, I don't see this re-strengthening very much once it actually does move back off, because this is pretty lopsided, and models aren't very optimistic with it at this point.
Yeah, unfortunately what doesn't help is that this thing has a very uncertain future. Of course, we're dealing with a lot of land, a very strange path for a Western Pacific system in general, given the fact it will be moving back over waters, hitting the Hainan Peninsula again, and then exiting into the South China Sea again. So, pretty much a full loop that we're going to be seeing out of this, and then after that is just a complete question mark of what we're going to be expecting, especially as this gets closer to Infa.
For sure.
So, do we think that Infa and Cempaka might do a Fujiwara effect?
Well, considering the fact that if you look at the cones that the JTWC JTWC has for Cempaka and Infa, the day 5 points, they do overlap on the cones. So there is a few areas that are pretty much in two cones at once right now in the ocean.
I see.
So it's very much possible that we could be seeing a potential interaction, but obviously in the end, we are dealing with Infa, the much more large system, compared to Cempaka, which we have all been seeing be small. And that's possibly what helped it intensify as quick as it did. Of course, smaller systems are more subjective to intensify faster than the larger systems. So,
Have we read off the warnings on Infa for Japan and Taiwan?
not yet, but if you would like to, that would be very useful.
Christian, I know you have them if you want to go ahead and read them.
Okay, well, based off what I've been given, there is a storm warning for southern Okinawa, Miyakojima. A gale advisory is in effect for the rest of the Ryukyu Islands, Kagoshima, Miyazaki, Kumamoto, and Saga. That's all for Japan, and over in Taiwan, there is a heavy rain advisory for Pingtung County and Kaohsiung City. I do apologize if I butchered the pronunciation there.
And as info gets closer and closer to land, we'll probably see more warnings and advisories get put up. But those are just some of the current ones that are up there as of right now.
No one seems to be, not sure why you're drawing a smiley face on that, but it looks like you're looking at a better view of the imagery on Infa. I don't know what type of imagery it is specifically, considering the fact you are apparently using your phone to screen share, or...
Yeah, that's the only way I can do the imagery, but I hope that's good enough. So
A little bit pixelated, but
this-
it's fine.
So yeah, you can see when you really look into the eye, especially like there. Wait a minute. Look right there. You can see mesovortices in the eye. Also, which is pretty apparent that here is lack of convection and convective bursts wrapping around to close that that gap, that dry air intrusion, which is about here. Yeah.
Uh,
And also the cirrus in the eye, and in some places you can see all the way to the ocean surface, so it's clearing just fine.
yeah, definitely a healthy structure. It's just got to mix out that dry air intrusion, which it should do pretty fine without issues.
Do we want to start answering some questions that the chat has for us? Because I'm seeing some people ask some questions that I think we have some answers to.
Yeah, we might as well, since there is quite a few, and it looks like the next half hour, as we've pretty much been talking about the basics, we might as well be answering this, especially given the fact that we are, of course, in a code red situation on our T-code scale.
Alrighty.
Our first question, I'll read out the questions.
Sounds good.
Can Cempaka have any effects in the western Visayas of the Philippines?
I would doubt it. I mean, probably the most you're going to get is some light rain at this point. Again, though, it's a pretty uncertain future for the storm, and the track isn't set out in stone by any means, so it would be good to keep a watch, but I don't see it being too much of an issue at this point for
I think-
Visayas.
I think Visayas is the more it's the more middle of the Philippine islands, so I don't even think they're going to get any effects from it at all, because it's Luzon, Visayas, and whatever's the one in the south. I'm not sure off the top of my head, so I don't think that Visayas will be getting affected at all. Maybe part of Philippines that gets light rain would be far northern Luzon and the islands off the northern part of Luzon, but that's still to be seen. And that would be more for Cempaka instead of Infa.
Another question, what are the chances of Cat 4 and or Super Typhoon status for Infa?
I wouldn't rule it out necessarily, but it's likely to peak tomorrow, and it would have to strengthen quite a bit by then if it did want to get to Super Typhoon status. Cat 4 is definitely not out of the question at this point with the structure it currently has. Pretty healthy. Yeah, I could definitely see this getting to Cat 4.
Yeah, its pressure is definitely going to get low to what you would typically expect from a Cat 4, probably, at this point, given the fact the pressure is already so low. We are looking at 954 millibars at the moment, so definitely possible that it does get into the 940s, maybe 930s.
I did see a question. Someone asked in the chat, would Cempaka and Fabian, which that's the Philippine name
That is not.
for Infa,
Yeah, that is. There you go.
well, that's what I was saying. That's the Philippine name for Infa. Would Cempaka and Infa possibly like merge together or affect each other or something? Affect at the same time?
Like we said earlier, it is possible. Cempaka, we started looking at a very uncertain future, so of course that is going to be something we have to watch over the next several days. But as of right now, on the current forecast track, the day 5 points on the cones from the Joint Typhoon Warning Center do have overlap. And of course, the closer a cyclone gets to one another, definitely the more chances you see of an interaction going on. However, at this point, by day 5, Infa will be inland, so definitely going to be interesting to see what happens with that.
and if Cempaka, which currently is forecasted only to be 25 knots and probably a remnant low, if it did somehow keep its um, somewhat act together after coming off of China, and entered the PAR, it would receive the Philippine name Goryeo, um, which
Close
is
the
next
door.
name on the Pagasa list.
That's not how it works. Seriously?
Next question.
I see another question in the chat. Very, very good question. How come Hone is still not here?
Negative Pacific Meridional mode. That's the answer. So Pacific Meridional mode is just shows how cold or warm the sea surface temperatures are north or south of Hawaii, roughly the area from the Baja California to down to Hawaii. And currently we are in the negative phase, and that has been since last year. We always had negative sea surface temperature anomalies there, and that meant that we had sinking air over the Central Pacific. I mean, the Central Pacific is usually isn't really active at all. And when you have negative sea surface temperature anomalies and additional anomalous sinking air over it, it is really unfavorable for tropical cyclone formation. So that's why we didn't have Hone in 1.5 years for now. It's been quite a while.
Another question that we have here, I will answer this one. The GFS is hinting a possible TC right after where Infa formed. What are your thoughts on this? The GFS isn't exactly forming a possible tropical cyclone at this point. It looks like it is trying to develop an extratropical cyclone. However, this extratropical cyclone is definitely going to be relatively intense, as it could actually impact the northeastern regions of Japan. So that is something that Japan needs to watch. It looks like it will be extratropical rather than tropical. However, it will be a little bit of a strong extratropical system. So that's why chances have been dropping. If you've been looking at our twos that we issue out to our Twitter every day, we did have it at 60% chance for a while, but we have since dropped it down significantly, down to 20%, and those chances could be actually generous still. So I would not be surprised if those chances continue to decrease if the models continue to show extratropical development rather than tropical. And of course, we are in the final half hour, so if you do have any questions for us, feel free to ask them. Please tag us at Force13. This will bring up our name in orange, and of course, we will be able to answer those.
And for those that have been going back to the why no Hone talk for a second, for those that have been counting, I think we're over 500 some odd days, 600 some odd days. I know we'll be at 2 years if we get to the point in October whenever, when was the last impact storm? Emma, I think Ema, whenever that dissipated. So if we get to that point without Hone, it would be 2 whole calendar years without a Central Pacific storm.
Yeah, as of right now, it's been well over 640 days at this point since we last saw a Central Pacific storm, so I'm sorry for my cat, but as I was saying, it's been 640 plus days since we last saw a Central Pacific storm, and unless that 10% AOY that we currently have waits until it enters the Central Pacific to form, it does not appear that we will be seeing any Central Pacific storms soon. It is more likely to see Central Pacific storms when it's an El Nino type year, as example 2015 obviously, and then of course we saw those in later years, of course, in 2018 and 2019, but as of right now, we are going back into a La Nina type pattern, so it is definitely unlikely that we see any Central Pacific storms for the near term. Another question from Carson Weather Tracking. Do you think that the Eastern Pacific will be more active than the Atlantic, or will they be similar?
At the moment,
Also-
I see probably the Atlantic having slightly more activity than the Eastern Pacific at this point. Of course, it could change. Eastern Pacific does tend to have sort of almost a first peak at this point in the year, where a lot of strong storms form. Then the Atlantic tends to be more in August, September, of course.
Yeah.
I think the Atlantic has a decent chance of catching up with the Eastern Pacific at this point.
Yeah, of course, we usually see the Eastern Pacific activity peak in the July, early August time frame, and then once we enter the second half of August and then pretty much into September and October, that's really when we see the Atlantic start to shine. So, as of right now, of course, we are going back into that La Nina, which really favors activity more than the Atlantic, and unfortunately, we've been watching those signs. We still haven't really backed down from our claims. We are still thinking that this year could be potentially active. We've seen those outlooks from Colorado State University, TSR. Both of those now predicting 20 storms in line with our forecast, so definitely possible that we could get towards the later section of the alphabet. And even if those three predictions verify, we're looking at the third most active Atlantic season on record, period.
As long as the rest of the season is not a pain to track like the first 5 storms have been, then I'll be happy.
Another question from someone with the name of Hurricane Felicia, not the actual hurricane, of course. At force 13, how fast is Infa moving right now? I believe Christian has that answer.
Christian is not in the call.
I believe
think he might be.
I believe
he did say 7 miles per hour.
7 miles per hour.
Yeah, it's moving at 7. At force 13, CPAC 2020 hurricane season animation. When? Well, A, there was no storm, so obviously there would be no animation on that, and B, Central Pacific storms are always included in the Eastern Pacific animation, so nothing going on with any kind of Central Pacific hurricane season. Force 13 will be, I think what you mean is, will the Western Pacific be more active than last year? Very likely so. As you can remember, last July we had absolutely no storms in the Western Pacific, and of course now here we are July 20th still, July 21st there local time, and we are of course dealing with a Category 2, 2 Category 2s, one former, one current, one likely to be a major typhoon soon.
And I think we also had another WPAC storm earlier in the month, or was the last one before the current 2? I believe. Was Champy late June, or was that early July?
Koguma came after Champy, I believe, and I believe that was
Koguma.
late June.
Okay, so it's still within the last month. We've had Kaguma and all those. So we've had 3 in the last month or so.
Another question for Carson Weather Tracking. Do you think that with the La Nina, do you think we could see a Category 5, I'm assuming this is in the Atlantic, between August through October?
Possible.
I mean, it's possible, but Category 5s are just entirely dependent on some seasonal variation, and you can predict those. There's a reason why CSU or all these agencies, NOAA, all these are not predicting Category 5s in their outlook, because they're pretty rare. They're entirely dependent on subseasonal variation, and there really isn't that much of a correlation between the active years and Category 5s. We had very active years without any Category 5s and very inactive years with Category 5. For example, 1992.
92 with Andrew, that's one that had a Cat 5. 2012 with
19 storms.
Yeah, 19 storms with the likes of Sandy and all those other ones. Tomas, I'm just trying to think of a bunch that came up to my head. I think Nate was also in that year, or Nate was 2017. No Cat 5s in 2012. So.
And of course we did have a La Nina last year, and obviously now we did not have a Category 5 last year, of course, with IOTA's downgrade from Category 5 to Category 4 status. So despite us having a La Nina, the most active tropical cyclone season in the Atlantic yet, There was no Cat 5s last year, so it just goes to show that it's definitely unpredictable. You cannot say for certain that there will be a Category 5. Another question, what is your opinion on the major hurricane forming in the eastern Pacific on the GFS around between July 27th to July 29th?
That's still
Makes
a week.
sense.
That's still a week plus out. So
Yeah, like I said,
that's interesting.
let me see if that actually is the case. The last I have not looked past hour 120 on the models, considering I was using that to make the TWB. Let me see here.
Only thing I can say is that it generally makes sense when you combine it with the MJO that is likely gonna be in the Eastern Pacific at exactly that time. So I wouldn't be surprised if we have another major hurricane within the next 1 or 2 weeks in the Eastern Pacific.
So I see. So it looks like the GFS does develop a system between the 27th and 29th as that user commented, but it does not become a major if that, not until August 1st. Of course, that is 270 hours out, 11 days out, and that's exactly not something that can really be said as actually happening, but I'm sure that if the current trends hold, the National Hurricane Center will designate it as an area of interest in the next 2 to 3 days.
I'm currently going through the other models real quick. European's not picking up on anything. The Canadian only goes up to the 30th, and they only have it at a pressure of 1,002. So the GFS currently has it as the only one that's going to the major. And another thing is you also have to see for how many model runs has the GFS been picking up on a storm forming. If this is the first time that it's picking up on something, I would take it with a grain of salt. It's probably not going to happen. But if it's been showing this for about 3, 4, 5, 6, even 7 model runs, then it's something to keep an eye on.
Another question, Force 13, when do you think a Cape Verde system will finally form? Well, I don't know why you're really saying Cape Verde system, considering the fact we've had quite a few tropical waves. I think you're referring to just something that's forming on the far eastern side of the main development region. That's probably going to be happening in August, definitely in August.
Usually the storms that form out by the Cape Verde Islands, so that's the easternmost part of the MDR, and that's usually when they form going towards the peak of the season. And those storms, like for example Florence, that was a Cape Verde because it formed all the way out there. So usually those types of storms don't form until about late August, early September, around the peak of the hurricane season. And as we've seen in the past few seasons, Irma 2017, Florence 2018, Lorenzo 2019, usually those storms, those are all Cape Verdes, and they usually form at or around the peak of the hurricane season.
I had a question that related back to our 2020. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, when looking at kind of Cape Verde systems, that's always August 15th is the date. After that, they usually occur. Before that, it's pretty rare that you have a system so far east. So keep in mind August 15th. Then we're gonna have there is usually the most drastic uptick in Atlantic hurricane season activity, especially in the MDR.
And I did see someone ask, so does that mean with IOTA's downgrade, the last Cat 5 in the North Atlantic was Dorian?
By our analysis, yes, but officially that still goes to Lorenzo.
And that's the big debate. Was Lorenzo a Cat 5? Officially, they're still going with that. By our analysis, Lorenzo never reached Cat 5, so that would still mean it would be Dorian. But officially, it's Lorenzo. But I expect maybe them to do a reanalysis on that and maybe downgrade it, but we'll see what happens.
Another question, is it possible for an El Nino? Well, complete the opposite, actually. We did get a La Nina watch issued about a week or two ago, which means that it is likely that we do see that La Nina emerge once again for the fall and winter of this year. El Nino is definitely looking less and less likely. It was 10%, and I think those chances are just remaining very low. So unfortunately for the Atlantic people who have been hoping for an El Nino, that is not going to be the case. It does appear that at the very least we will be in a cold neutral, which isn't exactly the best option either, or a La Nina. So that is what we're going to be looking at for the remainder of this year.
Yeah, actually, the biggest peak in Atlantic accumulated cyclone energy is just at, or pretty much exactly at negative 0.5 degrees in the 3.4 Nino region. So cold neutral to weak La Nina is the actual activity peak of the Atlantic Ocean, because when you have a really strong La Nina, there's gonna be dry air in the basin, especially in the western part of the basin, like what happened in 2010, where we had a very dry Atlantic until August 15th, when the activity picked up drastically.
So yeah, definitely not good news for the potential hurricanes and stuff. Another question: what's the SOI, and what are our opinion on the rapid cooling in the Nino region?
Give me. I think I see what it is. Wait, actually,
Can you repeat the question again? You cut out for me.
Oh, sorry. They were asking what is the SOI and what are our opinions on the rapid cooling in the Nino region.
I'm not sure what that is off the top of my head. I just typed into Google. It says the Southern Oscillation Index, but that's coming from the Bureau of Meteorology in Australia. So I'm not sure.
Yeah,
If
SOI
that's what it
Southern
means.
Oscillation Index.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably pretty high right now, because we have the MJO in the Maritimes, and sinking air over the Atlantic. So and in the SST trend from Coral Reef Watch, you can also see cooling in the Enzo region. So yeah, that's partially forced by the MJO being currently in the Western Pacific, which means easterlies in the Eastern Pacific toward the MJO, which is cooling the Enzo region.
And another question from Alexia Taylor: when was the last time we had an El Nino? That would be 2018. There was someone that said 2015, but 2018 was technically the last time we had an El Nino.
Yeah.
That's why the Eastern Pacific ended up being as active as it was, with that 302 ace, and of course we did get up to Xavier on the Eastern Pacific list. And of course, keep in mind we still got 10 minutes, so if you have any more questions, please continue to submit them before we do get into the closing segment of this live tropical weather bulletin.
I do see. I think did we answer about the La Nina coming back?
Yes.
Because I know someone said coming back on Western Pacific, or will it continue to the neutral phase? El Nino and La Nina is only in the Eastern Pacific, but I know it can affect the waters elsewhere as well.
Yeah, Eastern and Central Pacific.
Someone in the chat saying 82, saying Infa looks like a Cat 4. I'm not sure if that's true. I'd have to take a look at it.
For me, it doesn't look like a Cat 4. I think the next tropical cyclone fix is gonna get it towards 95 or 100 knots. It's improving, but there's still this significant dry intrusion. There's even OW in the eye wall there, so there's definitely a significant break. I think the next tropical cyclone fix is gonna get it up to 100 knots or so. Should be right around the major typhoon status right now.
Alright, I see another question. Can a major or even a Cat 1 cyclone form in the Bay of Bengal in October? Is there any possibility? Well, currently, I know the North Indian Ocean is currently in that monsoonal phase, so you're not really going to see any tropical activity, but I'm pretty sure their second peak of the season for the Arabian Sea and the Bay of Bengal, I believe that's the October-November time period, correct?
Yeah.
So it's possible to get a tropical storm in there, a depression in there in October. It's possible to get all the way up to a Cat 5 in there. It's not a guarantee. We can't really, forecast 3 months into the future, but it's a possibility that that Cat 1 or a major can form in the Bay of Bengal in October, because that's usually the second peak of the North Indian Ocean cyclone season. I know we had Yas was an Arabian Sea major back in May, and then followed by or no, sorry, Tauktae was the major. Yas was the Bay of Bengal. Cat 1. Both of those were in May. So it's possible that we could see another Cat 1 or possibly a major in the Bay of Bengal this year during the season. But that would not be until October or November when that would happen.
And typically, second-year La Niñas are notoriously active in the Bay of Bengal in the second peak. So I wouldn't even be surprised if we see one or two pretty intense tropical cyclones within that area. A year that comes to mind for second-year La Niñas is, for example, 1999, which had several intense tropical storms and cyclones there.
Let's see here. More questions. What is Infa's eye temperature right now?
Good question. Give me a second.
It should be around 9 or between 9 or 15 degrees Celsius, I think.
Alright, we're waiting to get that answer at the moment. We do have a question in the meantime. Do you think that Cempaka...
It's 9 degrees Celsius. There's a tiny speck of WMG within the eye. But currently, eye temperature doesn't even matter that much. I said earlier, the eye temperature currently, because we have this cirrus within the eye rotating around, is gonna fluctuate drastically between WMG and other Dvorak color scheme brightness temperatures. So I wouldn't even look at the eye temperature right now. It's not that important to get the exact eye temperature right now because it's gonna fluctuate drastically.
Yeah, I'm currently playing around with the eye temperature right now. Currently on windy.com. I mean, Windy's not the best website, but it's giving me somewhat of an eye temperature. I recommend using other websites. But the highest I see is 11 degrees Celsius. The lowest I'm seeing is about minus 22. And so, I mean, this thing is not completely open yet. So take it with a grain of salt with what we're saying. I'd say probably best estimate would be anywhere between -6 and about 6 degrees Celsius, possibly for eye temperature. But the variance is just, it goes all the way from -20 to 11, 12 degrees Celsius. So there's not a set eye temperature yet.
Yeah, that's just because we have cloud debris within the eye that's rotating
Yep.
around.
And as we said, there's also that dry air intrusion. So the eye is trying to open it up, but there's still the cloud stuff there, and you really can't see down to the ocean clearly yet.
Another thing, will there be a track for Hurricane Felicia after it finally dissipates, as it was a Category 5 by our analysis? There will be a track of Hurricane Felicia. Also in the works is the tracks of Claudette as well as Elsa, and I believe there is another one in progress as well. So that is coming. I think there's also one on Rayoni coming out soon too.
Yes, Rayoni is coming out, and I'm pretty sure because Rayoni is a hurricane, we're also going to see a historic track animation coming soon, and that would be Katerina of 2004, the only other South Atlantic hurricane on record.
Oh, in our analysis, yeah. Let's see here. Of course, we are getting to the end soon. I'm just waiting for the end side of things to export on my end. But in the meantime, please get your last questions that you have, as there is not much time for us to answer those before we do head off. In the meantime, I will be announcing the plans that we have for tomorrow. Tomorrow, Nathan will be back and covering the latest on Infa as well. Well, Infa primarily. This will be at 11Z. That is Universal Coordinated Time. I believe that would be 7 a.m. in Chinese time and 8 a.m. in Chinese time. So, or Japan time, I should say. That is what we're looking at right now. Another question: can Infa become a 155-mile-an-hour super typhoon? We did answer this earlier. Unlikely. It would require a lot of it would require that dry air and intrusion to be basically ineffective entirely, although it is going to take some time for it to mix out that. When will the worldwide cyclone animation be? We know that that is definitely much later than normal, but there will still be one in 2020, a 2020 worldwide one. That should be coming out some point in August. But yeah, continuing those what I said, we have that in live stream hosted by Nathan tomorrow at 11Z, and then we will be back again tomorrow night with more coverage on Infa as well, when I'll be hosting that. So tomorrow morning it will be Nathan, and then tomorrow night I will be coming back. At least this is here in Eastern time, so maybe morning and night for you guys. Force 13, do you all think that the peak of the Atlantic season will be dead, or will it be active? It's definitely going to be the latter. It is definitely going to be active.
Active, of course.
Hate to be the bearer of bad news,
Yeah,
but
I think so too.
hate to be the very much bearer of bad news, but we are looking at a very possible significant peak season for the Atlantic.
Yeah, especially with the MJO coming back at around August 10th, August 15th, which is usually just the date where it begins to uptick dramatically in terms of activity.
I see one more question before you go into the on this day, Xavier. Is it possible for a major to hit Atlantic Canada? Usually the sea surface temperatures up there are very cold. They're not going to sustain a major. If you do get anything that would be the same wind speeds as a major, it would pretty much be extratropical at that point, not really tropical at that point. So no, I don't think a major is going to hit Atlantic Canada. But what do we have on this day, historic wise?
Well, I'll be getting to that soon once this finishes exporting. It's almost done, so we're pretty much ending a little bit later, but that's just helping out to get all the remaining questions out. So.
Damn, we trying to shoe-ball in.
Yeah, we got another minute. We'll get there. What we already answered this question, Alexia. What's the eye temperature for Infa? It is 9 degrees Celsius. How does wind shear appear? That was their most recent question.
Well, I mean, I know shear just moves around the world and all that stuff. So, just like, all the different phases of the MGL and all that. Sometimes there's areas where tropical waves go into that is favorable wind shear environment for development, and there's other times where there's parts where it's not favorable for development, so they won't develop. It mainly depends on how the shear is moving in and around the world. There's many different factors when it comes to tropical cyclones, including sea surface temperatures, water vapor, relative humidity, high and low shear. Usually we look mainly at low shear, though.
If you want to know if a tropical cyclone is sheared, usually you can see it with the eye outflow. If there's an area somewhere on the side of a tropical cyclone which doesn't have any, it's usually the side from which is sheared. And also, if a tropical cyclone has an exposed center, that's almost always due to shear in some way. Yeah.
Alright, this is the last question I'm going to be answering. They're asking what are when we think that the next storm will be forming in the Atlantic, it's probably not going to be until either extremely late July or August.
Yeah, I think it would I personally think it's going to be after the calendar turns to August. But now,
If it's not,
now,
if it's not,
Sorry.
Go ahead.
yeah, okay. If it's not a subtropical surprise storm like the B storm we had this year, I don't even remember the name.
Bill.
Bill.
Something in the Gulf Stream or so. Yeah, Bill. But for real tropical activity, I would be looking at August 5th, 10th, or 15th, somewhere in that area. The MJO is gonna come back to the Atlantic, and that's likely when we're gonna have a big boost of activity.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, so now,
Yeah,
what do
we're
we
getting
have
there.
on this day?
Anyway, well, I have to close things first from...
Oh, true. Sorry.
Thank you to our live team. That did consist of Elliot, Jonesy, Noah, and Mike here at the end. And of course, it's been here hosting in USHQ, Xavier Burns. And now we will finally get to the On This Day.
Woo.
Alright, on this day, we had Hurricane Dora peaking as a very high-end Category 4. We also had Brett and Cindy in the Atlantic, while Maon was weakening still from its peak of Category 5, a very long-lasting storm there. Of course, Dora is the main feature as shown on the satellite image below. 155 miles an hour was what this storm peaked. You can find more of our cyclone history by our Twitter handle at Cyclone History. They do post on this day graphics every day, and it does take quite a bit to get those images edited and graphics made, so please check them out. Well, with our code red situation, the next name in the Atlantic is now Fred, followed by Grace. In the Eastern Pacific, we're now looking at Hilda, followed by Ignacio, and in the Central Pacific, we all know that you're waiting for me to make a joke on Hone, because, you know, it's Hone. So, Hone is still the next name. And, yeah, that's pretty much it. I really don't know what else I'm supposed to be saying anymore. It's just me repeating myself constantly. In the Western Pacific, it's now Napartak, which, isn't exactly the best name we've seen, after 2016, followed by Lupit next. In the North Indian Ocean, it is now Gulab, followed by Shaheen. In the Southwestern Indian Ocean, we're waiting for Anna, followed by Batsire. In the Australian region, we're looking out for Patty and Ruby. And in the South Pacific, we're looking out for Cody. We'll be back for more live coverage tomorrow.